MP5.
It's such a smooth weapon. There's over like 90 variants of the thing. It has a solid reputation. It does require maintenance. Another cool thing is they had a magazine pause button where you could hit a button, shoot it in semi-auto, and it would stop and it wouldn't load another round in. We've talked about it before. It's very reliable, very durable. You can replace the gas tube. There's a bunch. Here,
Starting from the bottom with the M1911.
We're rocking a 1911, probably one of the most important pistols ever made. This is a modern MP 2.0. Almost everything has been influenced by John Moses Browning's the 1911. Actually, the second version of the MMPs, the grip angle and everything is the same. This guy right here, this is a replica. Both World Wars, Vietnam, parts of Desert Storm. Up until even very, very recently, this was still used. A modernized version of this was still used in certain special operations units in the military. So I believe this is the longest serving firearm in military history. It's hard to beat.
Yeah, there were a couple of guys in SF when I was over in Iraq that were using them, so.
Well, when the Beretta first came out too, it was hard to make, for some people to make the switch. The triggers on these, like a bad trigger on a 1911 is still better than a good trigger on a striker fired gun. Some of like the grip angle, the trigger, also just the way the safety is. And for teaching, this is one of the best firearms to teach on too, because just where you put your hands and everything, it just lines up perfectly. That top part just sits right on there. I mean, this is just a classic firearm. But when I shoot this particular one, it shoots low and to the left. None of my other pistols shoot low and to the left. And part of it is these super rudimentary sights on here. Look at that. And that's the way they were in World War I and World War II, where more modern 1911s have updated features. This is target sights. I'd like to replace those. But you can see it's much higher profile. And then other things like you have a much more extended beaver tail. You got what they call a commander size hammer because a normal hammer doesn't fit. I ran this in a tactical pistol class run by the late great Wes Doss. Because of the hammer bite, the web of my hand was bleeding. It was just bloody and raw by the end of the class because if you have big meat hooks like I do, this thing comes down and it'll just smoke you. They're finally now replaced with the SIG M17 and M18. And so they finally ended up switching to a striker fired 9mm as opposed to a 45. But the reason they picked this 45, they had a prisoner of war in the Banana Wars and he was shot like 4 times in the chest with a 38 revolver. And the dude was like, ow. And then somebody had to like butt stroke series to the head in order to take him down. So that's when the US military was like, let's go with a 45. And so that's when they adopted the 45 ACP. Now, do you got any trigger time behind a 1911?
No, man, I've never shot the 1911, but it has this kind of mystique to it because it's been around for so long. I'd definitely like to get my hands on one.
Well, next time I'm out in LA, I should be coming out this winter, and I'll be out for SHOT Show. I'll bring a couple out. We'll do some shooting.
Right on, man. Nice. M9, go!
All right, the M9. Ooh, wait. Ooh, got one. The M9. So this is actually a 22 version that I just picked up specifically to teach people how to shoot. So this was actually selected over the P226 to replace the 1911 only because of cost. So I guess the P226 did a tiny bit better, and I think it compared to the initial M9 was a better pistol. The newer iterations, the A1 is superior to the one I carried, and this is also what we both carried when we were overseas.
Yep, that was my secondary.
I got like 8 years of professional experience behind one of these. The A1 is better. It has a rail on it. A2 never became anything, but the A3 is even better than that. So these were 15 rounds, but when these were first adapted, people didn't like them very much, and especially people that gave them hard use. There was an instance of one exploding and injuring a special operations warfare warrior soldier. There was a couple other instances of them breaking, and Beretta's like, well, you're not using the spec ammunition. The ammunition's too hot. The military's like, no, you need to reinforce the frame. So because there was some frame crackage and whatnot. One thing that's nice about this is this open frame design is like nicer for like clearing stoppages and whatnot. It took a lot. They reinforced everything. Now the newest versions are super nice weapon systems. I'm not a fan specifically for 2 reasons. Up here you have a safety, combination safety and decocker, where the 1911, we got a frame mounted safety. It just makes so much more sense. Same thing with like my everyday carry. I like the frame-mounted safeties. Partially, if you need to do remedial action, right? When you pull it back, you have instances of soldiers accidentally putting the safety back on when they're doing remedial action. Now, one thing that I would do whenever I carried this is I would put in a new spring So that way this was no longer a safety, it was just a decocker. So all it would do is decock the weapon so you could still use it and it would pop back up. How did you feel? What did you think about the Beretta?
Beretta to me was always big, heavy, chunky, clumsy. It was also the first pistol I ever fired. Like, I had never fired a firearm before I went into the military, and that was the first sidearm I ever carried. I shot a lot with it. I always shot it with gloves, and I always wondered if that might have made a difference in my experience with it, because it just seemed so heavy. It had a 9-pound trigger. It had a 9-pound trigger squeeze, which was
in the double action. Yeah.
Pistol. Yeah, the next pistol that I had after that was a Glock 19. I think that was the next handgun that I shot, and it was just a world of difference. I didn't know it could be so good. So not a very good first handgun experience. But hey, it was.
Let me clarify. If he's saying that a Glock 19, which has a trigger and it's a striker fired, it was a world of difference better than the Beretta M9's double action trigger, that's really saying something. Like, what size gloves do you wear?
Large.
Large, yeah. So like large and medium, people that wear large and medium can sometimes have a harder time with this chonky grip. The newer versions have replaceable grip back straps and replaceable things on the grip, so that way it can get more narrow. The M9, we had a hard time with the issue magazines because they didn't go with the magazines that Beretta suggested that they go with. They went with cheaper mags. And so when I was on deployment, we bought all of our own magazines because I would load a mag just to test it. I would take the top round off and it would just stay down like that. Like, the springs were faulty. I would not trust my life to the initially issued military M9 magazines. I guess that problem's resolved now. Yeah, fun little tidbits about the M9 Beretta. The P12 is actually the German military designation for USP.
Oh, okay.
It is a military designated name, but it's the German military, and this is a German weapon system. So H&K. So if I had to go to another planet, I would carry a USP handgun. The USP was the first pistol I ever bought. Only gun I ever sold. Don't sell guns, folks. Trade guns or just buy new ones. Don't sell guns. It is the world's most tested and durable handgun. It was developed kind of from and about the same time as the Mark 23, the offensive weapon system. This thing is so rugged. They lodged a squib load in the barrel and then fired it, and that you see a little bulge in the barrel, and then they still kept shooting, and they more than passed their accuracy standards. This thing is just so durable and so reliable, and it's pretty sexy looking too. It's definitely dated. The ergonomics on it are dated, but one of my favorite things on it is the standard trigger package. They have different trigger packages, but the one I carried, so I did security in Madison, Wisconsin, carrying a 45 USP. This is in like the very early 2000s. There was a general consensus on modern 9mm ammunition, so I carried a 45 because I wanted, stopping power. The neat thing about the USP is you can handle plus P rounds, so extra powerful ammunition. The gun is so robust that you can actually take a 40 Smith & Wesson USP, change out a couple parts, and get it to run 10mm, which 10mm can get up to 41 Magnum power load. So it is a very reliable, very durable handgun. There's some weird things like the, you see how like the mag release on this bad boy, this is my EDC, is right here, and it is on the 1911 and the Beretta. It's different. It's actually these two little tabs on the USP on the trigger guard. So that takes a little bit of a learning curve to do to drop the magazine. It's not difficult. But yeah, man, the USP is just, it's such a sexy pistol. It's a real badass pistol. I want a couple of them. I just wish that H&K would listen to civilians more and update the ergonomics just a little bit, and then come out with a 10mm, because they would sell a gazillion of official number predictions from
P227.
So the P227 is kind of like the love child between the P226, which almost was a U.S. military adopted handgun. Navy SEALs carried 226s for many, many years. It's a very reliable gun. I almost bought a 226 over the USP, but I went with the USP when I bought my first handgun. The 226 married with the P220. The P220 was a 45 variant, but from SIG, back when it was SIG Sawyer. Very, very well made weapons, metal frame. They're double action, and so unlike the Beretta, which has the decocker up here on the slide, the SIGs have a decocker right in here in this area. So you decock the hammer by pushing down here. And so it was separate from the safety. It didn't include that. The P226s only came in 9mm and 40 Smith & Wesson. Forgive me, I'll do push-ups, just to tell me in the comments. They might have come in 357 SIG, I'm not certain. But 9mm Parabellum and 40 Smith & Wesson were the main models. And so they just took the P220 design and made it double stack, because the P220 was a single stack. back and added a rail to it. And so the P227s are, other than the large diameter bore size of the barrel, is indistinguishable from the later P226 models. So nobody knows why they didn't just like add 45 to the P226, but it's a separate line and it's only in 45. So that's where it comes from. I think the reason we're going through so many 45s right here is from a tactical standpoint, it is the easiest round to suppress because it's a subsonic round. So it's going to be a lot quieter going through a suppressor. It's not just the hot gases leaving the firearm that causes the boom. That's the initial boom. It's also a supersonic bullet is supersonic, which means it's breaking the sound barrier, which gives you that nice loud crack. 45 ACP is one of the best pistol calibers for suppression because it's still effective. It still has a decent amount of mass to deliver energy at the same time going slow and being quiet.
P45T.
So the P45T, as it's labeled in this game, is either an FNP or an FNX. FN really raised the bar from USP. So like the USP 45 only holds 12 rounds. And you know, it's 45, right? That's a big chunky magazine. The FNP held 15 rounds. That's crazy impressive for a 45. A lot of people compare the FNP or the FNX to the newer version of the USP, which is called the HK45. That has a little bit more narrow grip. I really like the FNX Tactical, which I think this is modeled after. So it comes with a threaded barrel. You can buy these as civilians. It's designed to be double action, single action. So your first shot is double action, but you can rack the slide with the hammer cock back and just put it on safe and leave it. So you can carry it in single action, which is how I would choose to do it. This was also one of the first weapon systems, one of the first pistols to come ready optic mounted on it. So it came with suppressor heights, which is now, I guess, old school, but you'd want suppressors heighted sights to run an optic up until recently. Now they're making lower profile optics, but also it had a threaded barrel so you could run a suppressor on it. It's a really, really cool, ergonomic, utilitarian pistol. It's one of my favorite out there. And they really upped the game for capacity for carrying that big coffee can 45 ACP round.
Next one. 5.7 USG.
So we've talked about the 5.7 before, and this was developed to defeat soft body armor, and it's designed to be in conjunction with the FNP 90, which is a modern PDW, which again was designed to defeat soft body armor. Now with the proliferation of like rifle plates, I don't know if there's a big point to carrying these. Kind of got a chonky grip, supersonic rounds, very, very flat shooting. Has a pretty good effective range. It actually has 30% less recoil than your standard 9mm round, which a lot of people don't realize. I'm not the biggest fan. I like that there's more options out there and more manufacturers are coming out with 5.7 stuff. This is one of the originals right here, the original 5.7 from FN Hirsch.
Next one. D50 Desert Eagle?
Yep. So this is the Desert Eagle. There was a rumor before we could check this out on the internet. There was a urban legend that Israeli NCOs carried Desert Eagles, since there was an Israeli military arms company that helped the design of this weapon system. But no, it has never been issued into a military force ever. It is a cool gun. I've shot a few. Now, when they were importing it, they had some issues. The U.S. has some weird regulations. When it first had rifling, like the engraved rifling in the barrel, they dropped this thing through it, and if it would fall through, that was supposed to be registered as a destructive device. Well, it didn't. But when they switched to polygonal rifle, it would just pass right through, and so they're like, nope, you can't have this. So the size of the bullet diameter used to be 0.510 inches, but they had to reduce it to 0.50 inches because it's no longer a destructive device. Now it's just a big freaking handgun. Isn't that stupid? So yeah, they had to re-engineer the weapon because of our stupid ATF regulations and whatnot. So that's a fun little factoid. But they are great for hunting. They will stop a grizzly bear. They're mostly just used for plinking and big game hunting. That's about it. And then flexing if you're in the cartel and you get one gold plated. Like mammoth bone grips or something. Like saber-toothed tiger grip.
Speaking of flexing, look at this Jackdaw pistol. Looks like a flintlock pistol right there.
Which the Jackdaw, I think, is like a bird in like Deep Space Nine, Star Trek. Yeah, so this is a flintlock. Flintlocks were cool. Flintlocks were the last firearm design before we went to cap and ball, which is much more modern, and then cartridge right after that. Flintlock replaced the wheel lock and the match lock. At first, they were just, owned by the wealthy, but then eventually they became more prolific. Thank you. There were some issues, though. So you had literally a piece of flint, and you had to have it like chipped away right, so that way it create enough spark. When you lifted it up the hammer, there's a little pan underneath underneath there that you would put more finely ground powder, and then you'd have your charge and everything on the inside. And so it was an issue with like moisture. It was really humid or wet, and people tried to make like leather coverings for it that didn't, sometimes it worked, it kind of didn't really work. And often you'd carry like a few of those on you. It was definitely a short range weapon, and it would often be used in conjunction with a sword or a saber because the tech wasn't there yet. But in a pinch, and they'd come in various sizes. A lot of women would carry these little tiny ones in their purses, or they're like, I don't want to say in their muff, but like, what is that thing called that like stick your hands in?
Oh, the corset.
I'm thinking earmuffs. No, you don't stick your hands in your corset.
What is this? I don't know what is that?
No, it's like a furry tube that you put both your hands in, and just to keep them warm.
Like a hand muff?
Yeah. Hand muff. Well, I don't want to say they stuck it in their muff, but it's the hand.
It's a hand muff. I don't know.
Okay, we'll figure it out. But yeah, so flintlock pistols. They're pretty cool. They have a neat place in history. I'm planning on building a flintlock rifle to go hunting with.
Next! Super Shorty shotgun.
So this is the Super Shorty is modeled after the Serbu Shorty, and you can buy these because it's a smooth bore. You just pay a $5 tax stamp. You still have to wait and go through the ATF and everything. But what these are really good at is breaching. They don't really come with a butt stock at all. You could put one on there. You're only holding like 3 rounds, and they are very effective at breaching. You use frangible rounds. You've got a little bit of experience learning how to breach with shotguns. They're not super effective for combat. A lot of people don't realize they are almost as accurate as a normal full-size shotgun. A lot of the inaccuracies from sawed-off shotguns come from like people just sawing it off with a hacksaw, and so it doesn't have a proper crown on the muzzle. A normal like jury-rigged backwoods sawed-off shotgun is not going to be as accurate, but these out to about 50 feet or so. For buckshot, the grouping might be about 2 to 3 inches wider, but otherwise it's still a pretty similar pattern, and slugs are just as accurate out to a certain distance as a normal full-size shotgun. So that's a little cool thing a lot of people don't realize. But yeah, very effective breaching weapon.
Spaz 12. Next!
The Spaz 12. So this is a sexy shotgun. If you've ever seen Jurassic Park or any 80s action movie, you've seen them.
Clever girl.
They actually redesigned them as like a modern, I'm going to say this wrong, but a modern sporting shotgun to have them properly imported into the US. They're really cool. It's a semi-automatic shotgun and a pump shotgun. Because back at that time, the less than lethal rounds, like beanbag rounds or OC rounds or whatnot, wouldn't have the same amount of pressure, so they wouldn't cycle properly. So you could hit a selector on this thing and either run it in semi-auto or a pump if you're going to run some less than lethal rounds. Another cool thing is they had a magazine pause button where you could hit a button, shoot it in semi-auto, and it would stop and it wouldn't load another round in. So that way you could, if you wanted to, load a less than lethal round and then switch it over right away. So they're pretty cool. An unfortunate thing, again, with some of the US importation laws during the 94 assault weapons ban, these things were banned by name, I believe. The ban rescinded in 2004. Didn't do anything for crime whatsoever. They stopped making these in 2000 and started to focus on the Spaz 15, which that's also a crazy looking sexy gun. Go look up the Spaz 15. But it was really unfortunate since they stopped making them in the year 2000, they didn't start re-importing them afterward. They're pretty pricey now. The collector's standpoint, they demand a pretty high price, but they're really cool shotguns, and yes, I do want one.
Next. SAS G12, like semi-automatic shotgun?
Yep. So we're working on another shotgun here. Yeah, so this is a Saiga, or a Saiga. These also, unfortunately, were banned in 2000.
Oh, okay. SAIGA.
Yeah. So this is based off the Kalashnikov. They just rearranged some part, or not rearranged, they just, made it to handle the shotgun round a little bit more. They opened up the openings to make it, eject better. And there's actually a metal flap that goes on the end of the bolt. When the bolt is forward, it seals everything up so you can't get mud or anything in there, because mud is a real big issue with AKs. They're very durable, very reliable, but actually an AR-15 handles better in mud. But the Saiga 12 does well because when the bolt's forward, it just seals it up, and then it just moves out of the way to eject the round. It's pretty cool. The selector doesn't work the same way as on an AK, but it's still a super effective, very reliable weapon system. And as a matter of fact, there are some police forces, some SWAT teams in the US that use them. It's used by over 40 countries. The Coast Guard even has a couple high-end teams that use Saiga 12s, which is crazy. So if you can get one, they demand a pretty penny now. They're very reliable, but in 2014, when President Barack Obama responded with banning certain Russian imports, and unfortunately Saiga, they got banned, so now they demand a pretty high price. That's why they stopped importing them in 2015 or 14.
MP5.
The venerable classic. This was replaced by the UMP45, which is cheaper, but they still sell more of these. They are complicated, you know, the delayed roller rock system, but it's so smooth. It's such a smooth weapon. There's over like 90 variants of the thing. It has a solid reputation. It does require maintenance, but like I know you fired a bunch of them. I've fired a bunch. They're just so smooth and very accurate. They are complicated, you know, the delayed roller rock system, but it's so smooth. It's such a smooth weapon. There's over like 90 variants of the thing over the world to this day.
Next, P90.
The FNP90. So again, this was developed as a type of PDW personal weapon system, but also for like security purposes, government or private. It has a very, very high rate of fire, but we're shooting that 5.7 round, which was designed to defeat soft body armor, because there was a while where soft body armor was pretty prolific, and a lot of terrorists, a lot of kidnappers, a lot of insurgents started using that stuff. This is used by several law enforcement agencies, including the Secret Service. One neat thing about the 5.7 round is that the way it's designed, there's less chance of over-penetration compared to a lot of other PDWs, which means there's less likely to injure innocent bystanders, less likely for ricochets to occur. So I think that was also a deciding factor for the Secret Service, since they're often carrying these things with their little fake arms and their suits, you know, they're in, you know, their real arms inside holding onto a submachine gun. But, you know, they're often in large crowds of people. So having a very accurate weapon system, and it has a very, very flat trajectory. It is a very accurate round. Because it's so lightweight and small, those magazines that go on top actually hold 50 rounds. So that's kind of wild. And I don't need to talk about the weird way it like loads and then puts in and then ejects the round out of the bottom. It's pretty cool.
Nice. Next, PP19.
Yep, so the cool thing about the PP19, the head of the design team for this is actually Mikhail Kalishnikov. So Victor was the head of the design team for this. They wanted basically their version of an MP5 for their police units and their special anti-terrorist police and military units. They basically scaled down the AK, and at first it ran 9 by, was it 19 or 8? 9 by 18 Makarov. Makarovs are great surplus pistols to get a hold of. They're still reasonably inexpensive. They're really fun and really reliable. I can't recommend people getting into them enough. Yeah, you should get one too, bud. So at first this was featured at 9 by 18 Makarov, but now it's also, you can buy them in 9 by 19 Parabellum as well. They're very reliable, very effective. They don't, it's, I believe, a straight blowback, not a ton of recoil with this system. They're pretty cool.
Next, MP7.
So the MP7 in the 2A community has a lot of notoriety. The only U.S. government, I mean, special operations use them, but specifically the Naval Special Warfare, they use them quite a bit. And this was a direct competitor with the FNP90. Again, it's a very similar round, 4.5 by 30 millimeter. I personally like the Uzi, the Max. I don't like loading a magazine through the pistol grip, but there's advantages. Like if it's dark out, you can't see what you're doing. You don't have that muscle memory down. It's easy to find the pistol grip to reload a mag. They come with various sizes, but it also sticks out the bottom. It has a very, very high rate of fire, 950 rounds per minute, and it's select fire. But the guys that I know that run them didn't really like it. Yeah, there's like, it's super cool, but it kind of sucks. I'd rather carry, you know, a short-barreled AR for the same thing. The round is just way more effective. The 5.56 round is just way more effective than that little PDW. People were wearing plate armor, rifle armor, so that thing isn't very effective. It's a very well-designed, very, very, very expensive gun, and it has so much notoriety here because there's only a tiny amount of civilians that have. They don't sell them to civilians, and they keep using this excuse. There's like German law that doesn't allow for certain things, and it's just unfortunate. Yeah, I'd spend my money on something else. Great weapon. I'm a big H&K fanboy. I would say more dedicated H&K guy, but they're not as great as they're cracked up to be.
Oh, Vector. I'm familiar with this one. We shot one on an episode of Lethal Antiquities on Shiftfire.
Here we go, the Chris Vector. I just shot a 10 milli version a couple weeks ago. The caliber that this thing is best in is 45 ACP, suppressed in 2-round burst. It has an incredibly high rate of fire in full auto. It's available in a bunch of different calibers, 9, 45, 40 Smith & Wesson, 10 millimeter, and there's even a 22 long rifle version. If I had to pick, I would get a 45 version. Second choice would be 9. Third choice would be 10 milli, just because there's other platforms that do the 10 millimeter better, and I'm gonna have to pay all sorts of money and licensing and everything to be able to have a legal machine gun version of it. The 2-round burst is really where this is at, and the 45 and 2-round burst suppressed is just, it's amazing. It's the cat's meow. You're stacking these rounds right on top of each other with the subsonic round with the proper suppressor. It's going to be nice, quiet, and violent. It's a pretty effective system on them.
SMG-11. Look at that compact. That almost looks like...
Oh, I think this is a Mac 11. Yeah, this is a Mac 11. So they're pretty effective. The wire buttstock is not the best buttstock. It kind of moves a little bit. Now, these things have a really high rate of fire. They are pretty reliable. They're available in multiple calibers. 9mm is the most common available. Like I said, they're a great little PDW. I think there are more modern designs out there now. If you're a civilian in the United States and you're into machine guns, the Mac 10s and the Mac 11s are some of the easiest to get a hold of. I fired a bunch of different ones. The receiver has a serial number, and as long as it was manufactured up until a certain date, you can transfer. But because there's only so many of them, it gets incredibly expensive. These are some of the lesser expensive ones available.
Next! Scorpion.
The Scorpion. So this is a great little PDW. They were actually importing single semi-auto versions recently, and I was annoyed because I was moving. Otherwise, I ordered a couple. I want one in 380, but they come in 32 ACP, 9x18 Makarov, 9x19 Parabellum, and then 380 ACP. Which is funny, the 32 ACP was the standard issue round to Czech soldiers at the time, and so they were first developed in 32 ACP, and I would not want to carry a 32 myself. It's better than nothing, but it's kind of a really lightly powered round. I want one in 380 just because it's a cool caliber. I have a few 380s. 380 is generally the lowest I would want to carry for self-defense. It's like a neutered 9mm round, but they're great, man. Pretty high rate of fire, but very reliable. You would carry it just like a pistol. You would shoot it just like a pistol, but you could fold the buttstock down and then run it. This would be great for tankers, for security people. They're still in use today. It's still an effective little weapon system, and it just looks so cool. It feels great.
Classic bad guy gun from the 80s action movies.
Unless you're Neo. Neo running double Scorpions when he's entering that lobby in the Matrix, yeah.
Next!
All right, so the Scorpion Evo. This is a great EDW or pistol caliber carbine. In the United States, you can get them as a carbine with a longer barreled rifle, a 16-inch barrel, our weird, goofy regulations, or you can get it without anything on the back or a pistol brace to have the shorter barrel version. This was designed as a submachine gun for Czech forces by CZ, and it is effective. Comparing like the MP5 and the MPX and the CZ Scorpion, there's pluses and minuses to everything, but this is a fairly affordable gun for people in the United States in semi-auto, and there's all sorts of options available. And the magazines, even though they're proprietary, have really come a long way and become very reliable. And now there's other manufacturers making pistol caliber carbines or subguns, so to speak, that are taking CZ Scorpion magazines. So that says something. There's a few different generations of them. My buddy Kevin Durand used one in the movie we were in Korea together. That's where I got to meet Kevin. He's an awesome dude, but his bad guy character carried a CZ Scorpion, which is kind of cool. I'm planning on getting one at some point.
Next. MPX.
The MPX. So this is like, overall, the 2A community is pretty open and accepting, but there's a lot of, microcosms of, talkers. And one of the things, is calling people poors. If you get a CZ Scorpion, you're a poor. Unless you're a poor is what they call it. Unless you can afford an MPX. These are rather expensive. I think they're a little more expensive than what they're worth. They've gone through a couple of iterations. They are reliable. I believe the U.S. Army adopted this as their new submachine gun, which they haven't had a submachine gun in years. I think the Grease gun was their last officially adopted submachine gun. And so, yeah, they are reliable. They kind of give you a little bit of gas in the face when it's run suppressed. So, but it is a short stroke gas piston system, 9mm Parabellum. They're cool. They're expensive. I don't know. I'll have one if someone gives one to me.
Me too.
Otherwise, I'm going to spend my money on night vision and taking more classes and stuff. Also, I just have a minor issue with modern SIG. They kind of use like the general public as like their beta testers. The P320 was like that. And unless it's going to like military contracts, there's rumors that their quality control is maybe not the best for like their civilian stuff. I like SIG because they're innovative. They're under a microscope right now. So.
Okay, we got the PSG now.
So the PSG. When I first heard PSG, I instantly go to H&K PSG-1, which is a delayed roller rock semi-auto sniper rifle devised from the G3. But this is actually from Patriot Ordnance, which is a very high-end manufacturer. And this is very effective. They come in multiple calibers. They're pretty darn robust weapon systems. I would love to have one. From the profile, just from this video game, it looks like a LWRC 45. And that thing's amazing, except for it's not very accurate, at least when it first came out. This is the Patriot Ordnance Firearms PSG. It's cool. I haven't fired one. I would love to. My good buddy Michael Broderick has awesome famous actor guy. He's got a Patriot Ordnance 7.62 NATO and AR-10, which tune into Thunderpunk Radio to see that in action in a couple of months here. Yeah, it's a cool weapon system.
All right, next. 9mm C1. This looks like some old World War II action.
Yep, this replaced the Sten. Only it took a little while to replace the Sten, I believe. Let me double check my notes here. They wanted to replace it sooner, but it wasn't put into service until 1953. And this was used. Guess how late this was used by British forces? It'll blow your mind.
Maybe like the 80s?
97, dude. This was in U.S. military service in 97. Yeah, how crazy is that? This is also, you'd recognize it. This was modeled for the E11 blaster from Blaztech. For the Star Wars Stormtrooper blaster, and they jazz it up a little bit, which I think it looks good. Now that Disney owns it, they're just getting lazy, I guess. Like in some of these series, they're just running around with AKs, fairly jazzed up or whatever.
Space AKs, yeah.
Space AKs. Yeah, it was a very effective weapon system to be used all the way up until the 97, where it was finally replaced with their goofy bullpup rifles that nobody likes. But long-term service, I definitely want one just for aesthetics, for the Star Wars connection, and it's a reliable subgun. It's a pretty decent gun.
Next.
Okay, so we're going back to the same thing. It's yet a team, but by Viktor Kalishnikov, son of the great late Mikhail Kalishnikov. It's essentially an AK 9mm, and it's super reliable, very effective. They're really fun to shoot. But everything I said for the last one covers this one.
Next. SR635. No idea.
Okay, so this was developed by Knight's Armament Company. It's really weird. This is a 6.35mm weapon system. So it shoots kind of an odd caliber. There were a couple ordered, but for the most part, this hasn't really seen a lot of use in modern day. So I think it dropped at 2006 at SHOT Show, was when they first revealed it. That was long before I started going to SHOT Show. I think I was still in the military, still doing the Wisconsin thing. But yeah, it's a cool weapon system with a really odd caliber, and it's not really in a lot of use today. It's neat that they have it in the game though. We're running the M4 right here, and that's a classic.
Hey, all right.
You got a little experience, the M4. This guy's in the carry handle gang.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I ran with in Iraq when I was in SF, yep.
And honestly, you get an M4 with a carry handle, iron sights. All you need really to make that combat effective is put a white light on, and that's it. And then you can hand that off to just about anybody. The AR-15 style of rifle has a real small learning curve. The ergonomics are great on it. They're very reliable. Now, that gun was designed around a round that was designed for a 20-inch barrel. So when they first went to those short barrels, they did have some issues, and they had to figure out proper gas port sizes and lengths, and they had to figure out like buffer tube, weights and everything to make it run more efficiently. Once they nailed it, it's a very combat effective, weapon. I run a BCM 14.5-inch barrel, and I love this thing. This thing eats anything, steel. I trust that with my life, and I know both of us have trusted this rifle with our life. Did you ever have any bad experiences with your M4?
No, I mean, I can't remember. I used it so much. It was very reliable. As long as you kept it clean, carried it with me, it felt like a part of me. It was awesome.
And like by keeping it clean, you don't have to break it down. Make sure the star chamber's clean. Make sure there isn't a lot of carbon buildup on your bolt carrier group. Other than that, you didn't really have to do a ton of cleaning. Just the right amount of oil, wipe off the bolt. It's not like the Sergeant Major inspection bolt that you had to do and get out the chemicals and the white glove testing, and it's such bullshit.
Next! Mark 17, I think we're okay.
Is this the SCAR?
This looks like the SCAR.
I think this is a SCAR, yep. All right, so the SCAR 17, the good old UGG boot, good old pumpkin spice rifle. It's a decent rifle system, and they've gotten much better. They've continuing to improve each model. They now have a sniper style or a DMR gun. What's great about the SCAR 17 is it's a battle-proven, reliable weapon system that now there are tough optics and lights and lasers available to it, because this thing used to destroy optics just with the recoil. This is if you're in a mountainous terrain where your firefights are going 6, 7, 100 meters, 1,000 meters or more. You want 7.62 NATO over 5.56, because you can still hit a target with 5.56 at 1,000 meters, but it's no longer, especially depending upon the barrel length, no longer going to have that oomph to create a fatal wound. It's going to be more of an annoyance, and you want to neutralize the threat. And so this is a good weapon system. They actually started developing this because they had special operations had initial problems running full auto on their M4s when M4s were first adapted, before they worked all the kinks out of them. So
next, ACR.
So this is great. The Magpul Moscato. This design changed hands. Bushmaster was making the ACR back when Bushmaster was like high quality stuff. Their quality control kind of went downhill a little bit. Remington was making and selling the ACR for a little while. It was kind of this big cock tease to the 2A community because they always promised to have interchangeable bolts and barrels and magazines because they wanted to run 6.8 SPC and they wanted to run 5.56, which it did, and they wanted to run 7.62 NATO, a bunch of different things, and it just never really came to fruition. The rifle in 5.56 came to fruition, and it was really ergonomic, really intuitive. It was a pleasure to shoot. This is on one of my short lists of collector rifles to get at some point. They are getting reintroduced now, so hopefully everything will come to be as it was initially promised. But it's a cool weapon system, man. It really is.
Next. P416. HK416?
HK416. So again, we're going from direct impingement or sort of direct impingement to piston driven. And this is supposed to help with running suppressors. Less carbon foul up and everything. Did you ever run a piston driven AR style rifle? They're a little heavier.
No.
Yeah, they're a little heavier, but they are more reliable when run suppressed. And that's like the main reason that they were developed. So they have a lifespan, where you got to replace parts a little sooner. But if you have all the resources for it and you pay attention, it's not really an issue. So,
all right, the AK-47, what a classic!
AKM, AK-47. You see the way that sight optic is mounted on the sides of almost every AK. Yeah, they got this little doohdabber, and it does a great job of holding zero. And you can purchase them. You can find them for like $30 up to like $200, and that's a really decent way to mount an optic on there. Another way is like you can replace the gas tube with a German Shepherd wants attention. You can replace the gas tube. There's a bunch. Here, what? There we go. You guys get to look at my shiny head. Anyways, we've talked about it before. It's very reliable, very durable. It has a decent effective range. There's this argument that they're not super accurate. If they're well made, they're very accurate. I fired this guy accurately out to 250 meters. I haven't had a problem with it. And I'm going to outfit it with all sorts of, just a couple optics and a light on it. Yeah, they're very durable. The only thing you got to be careful about is mud because of the open, when you're shooting it, this gigantic ejection port, and then right here this is still exposed from the dust cover, so unless you're on safe while you're using it, if you get mud and stuff in it, it might not work the best. The AR-15 is actually better when it comes to mud, but otherwise, like cold temperatures, everything, it's a great weapon system. It's a great ranch rifle. It's a great everyday rifle. When we were in Iraq, I don't know if you guys had the same policy, but when we did a raid, we would let the family keep at least one AK. You're allowed to have one AK per family just for home defense, because there were still bandits and robbers and all kinds of craziness over there, just like everywhere. So
next, AK-12.
Yeah, so this is the newest iteration, and we're shooting 4.5 by 3.9. It's kind of like the Eastern Bloc version of the 5.45. They're very accurate, very reliable. They have a softer recoil. Yeah, they were recently, I think 2018 is when they were adapted to the military. So, and I think your buddy Jim Fuller has a couple. Check them out, folks.
Next. G36C.
Okay, so yep, the G36 replaced the G3 rifle, and it's really cool. It's got this weird charging handle. It's in the center, and you pull it like this, and it just springs back into place. My main issue, so like they're reliable, the recoil is okay, the controls are a little chonky. They're a little like kind of, I don't know, dig into your hands a little bit. My main issue, and this is with a lot of European magazines, for some reason, like you can stack these pretty easy in a double mag pouch, no problem, right? But the G36 mags, they have these couplers on them, these like protrusions, so you can attach a couple. So when you're running a gun, all you got to do is boop, and put a new mag in, which is great. That's really quick. For me personally, I think that's only effective if you're on base and you're just walking around, or for a home defense gun where you're pretty much whatever's on your gun is what you're going to be fighting with. Because you have an intruder or multiple intruders in your home, you're not going to have time to throw on a plate carrier and all this other jazz. I mean, maybe the most effective thing, just for everybody's listening, if you have a home intruder, get your family all in one room, barricade the door, and call 911 and kill anything that comes in to try to harm you. Don't try to clear your house. Back to this, it's a pain in the butt trying to put multiple magazines into double mag pouches when you have those mags coupled together. So that is one fairly significant ding toward the G36. A significant plus is it is a sexy looking gun. It's a very sexy looking gun.
Next, Oh, the AUG. I fired this on a Lethal Antiquity, Steyr AUG.
Yep, I fired a few of these in full auto. It's just a dream to run. You know, at first, like, they had some weird trigger kits. And a lot of bullpups, because there's a large bar that moves back and you're moving a lot more stuff for the trigger, they weren't the greatest. But there's trigger kits now, and the newer versions are much better running a trigger. Of all the bullpups out there, I want a Steyr AUG first, and then probably a Desert Tech MDR. I've met the owner of Desert Tech and, you know, talked to my buddy Vince as a Desert Tech. There's just something about the Steyr AUG. It's one of the OG bullpups. It's, you know, Australian military, the Austrian military, certain police forces in the US use the Steyr AUG or the Steyr AUG. It's just a super effective weapon system. And it's pretty space age. It came with an integral optic at first. And nowadays, I don't understand why any weapon would come with an integral optic, because optics keep advancing and advancing. Just put a rail on it so I can run whatever I want on it. And, you know, most of those you can now. Yep, they originally had proprietary magazines, but you can get them that run Stanag mags, just standard, you know, NATO 5.56 mag, which I prefer that. You know, it makes it easier when you're running and gunning with your team.
Oh my God, that was a plethora of weapons, Paul. Thank you so much for your knowledge. Did you have a favorite one of the weapons that we featured today from Ghost Recon Wildlands?
I got two. First, it's a tie between the 1911 and the USP. That's one. The USP will always hold a special place in my heart, but the 1911 is just so classic and accurate. It's just a timeless weapon. It's a gentleman's gun. It's an operator's gun. You know, it's a gentleman's fire. It's just a great barbecue gun. You know. What about you, Izzy? What was a couple of your favorites?
Games like this make me want to move to places like Arizona and just try every single weapon I can get my hands on. I had no idea there was this much variety in the firearms world, and this is just a small portion, and still so many to choose from in Ghost Recon Wildlands. It's amazing.
Hey folks, if you want to follow my adventures, you can check out Mav11B on Instagram.
Folks, if you want more amazing content like this, go over to Gameology's Facebook and YouTube page. Head on over to the Pop Culture Field Manual podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, or on Patreon for some